Well, hey everybody, I'm John Rethlin with Unpopular Wrestling Opinion, episode 27, and today's subject is comedy and wrestling. And I don't know how much hate I will or won't get for this because comedy is subjective, much like horror is subjective. There are some movies that are completely silly that I love, and then other ones that are also silly that I absolutely hate. It just really depends on A, the mood I'm in that day, or just what I find funny or what I find scary. And with wrestling is inherently silly. I mean, let's be perfectly honest about it. It's always been a work, but a lot of people take it seriously, and people should still take it seriously because there are wrestlers all over the world from in front of crowds of 50 to 100 people, in front of crowds of 10 to 50,000 people that are tearing their bodies up for our entertainment. So that right there, they deserve respect. They deserve mass respect for that. There are some that can pull off the comedy wrestling aspect well, but it's also going to be divisive because there are some examples of comedy I find pretty goddamn funny. And then there are other ones that I absolutely fucking hate. And, well, let me start off with one that I hate. I hate the 24/7 championship. I hate everything about it. I think it's an embarrassment. I think it's an atrocity. I absolutely hate it. It's fucking stupid. There are people, like my co-host, aka my best friend, the Durbinator, Chris loves it. Or he finds entertainment out of it. I don't want to fully speak for him, but he finds entertainment out of it. And that's fine. Him and I are on different sides of the fence with that. And that's okay. There are other people that agree with me that they think it's absolutely stupid. And then there are plenty that think I'm way too harsh on it. Well, yes, admittedly, I'm a bit harsh on some things that I find absolutely stupid because stupidity in wrestling has always been around and will always be around. There's no doubt about that. But to me, an example there is that championship makes the other championships just seem like jokes. And that's really where it offends me and where it bothers me. And at least that's my opinion. If you're going to create a joke title, well, if you're going to say that's a joke title, then how are a lot of the fans not going to see these other titles, even though they've been around a whole lot more, as joke titles? That's an example of where I don't think the comedy works. Now, that being said, the people participating in it, Drake Maverick, Elias, even though I think Elias deserves better, R-Truth, and so many others have made the most of it and have done everything they can to really promote it and have the most fun with it. If they're having fun, that's really what matters. I am just one fan, so I'm not going, it's not just all for me. It's not an audience of one. I'm not Vince McMahon, so I'm not rewriting the show 90 minutes or 9 minutes before the show goes live. No wonder the shows are disjointed messes because you have a 75-year-old crotchety dinosaur rewriting the shows. But back on topic. I just do not like 24/7 championship. I've stated before, say it again. I hate it. And I hated it when it was, when the inception first happened. I'm like, this is dumb and it's a horrible way to use a lot of these talents. And it's a horrible way because so many of these guys could be funny, but they're just made to look like, cannon fodder, like comedy jobbers and stuff like that. And that's not the way you go with it. It's not a good idea to do that. It's just not. I just don't understand it. I don't get why people find it entertaining, but I'm also not going to tell them they're wrong because, again, comedy is subjective. And you guys are going to laugh at that. And if that's what you find entertaining, that's totally fine. I'm going to give you some examples of stuff I like and stuff I find funny in wrestling. Taguchi in Japan, in New Japan. I got to see him live actually compete in the Super J Cup in Tacoma. It's absolutely awesome. Got to see Ospreay and Amazing Red in an absolute classic match, which was absolutely wonderful. And boy, we were packed like sardines in there, but man, it was a fun goddamn show. Taguchi does a lot of comedy, but also is a really goddamn good wrestler. When you mix the two, it actually works pretty well. Now, I admit Taguchi's antics do kind of get a little strange sometimes when he keeps doing them. Now, when they're in multi-man matches, 6, 8-man matches, and they do that kind of stuff, okay, it serves its purpose there. When it's a singles match, it's time to get down to business. Now, he will do the stuff where he'll use, he has Funky Weapon on his tights. For those who don't know who Taguchi is, he will use his ass as a weapon. Not like, Rikishi and stuff like that. Not stink faces, at least nothing that I've seen Taguchi do. But he'll do that. And then he'll get down to business, actually can wrestle really well. He gets a really nice ankle lock on. He will do some really good wrestling. He'll do some other comedy stuff where he keeps running into the ropes, running across the ring and everything, trying to do clotheslines, and then he gets tired out. That can be funny. Now, if you repeat it too much, it does get a little stale. So you have to pick and choose your spots on what to do, and you have to feel for the audience, get a feel for the audience. Toru Yano is somebody who does a lot of comedy. He'll keep pulling off the turnbuckle pads and stuff like that, and he'll, do low blows, and he'll do a whole bunch of stuff where he will, where he'll he'll do comedy stuff, but he actually can wrestle when he gets down to it. And his matches are usually kept short so the comedy doesn't get stale. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I admit I'm 50-50 on a lot of that stuff, even though I do find both Yano and Taguchi entertaining. Other people don't. Other people think it's fucking stupid, and they're like, well, why do you rail against it in WWE but not in New Japan? I do rail against it in New Japan. They have to pick and choose that stuff because otherwise they make it just seem silly. And having breaks and having, some matches where it's like, okay, hey, we're going to have a little bit of fun here, that's okay. But if you present it as an actual sport, then fans are going to buy into it. Otherwise, they're going to see these guys and just say, oh, okay, they can't actually do anything. They're just comedy wrestlers. And nobody's going to take them seriously, even when they can actually do some shit. And there's other comedy stuff that they do in New Japan. Sometimes LIJ does some stuff. Naito can do some good comedy, even though Naito is a really serious wrestler. And that glorious hair. Not as glorious as Tanahashi's, though. But back to WWE. The problem is there are a lot of naturally funny people in WWE, but you have their brand of comedy, which doesn't really always work. You got Vince that laughs at a whole bunch of stupid shit, which I can identify with because I laugh at stupid shit as well. But that 24/7 title, I just don't like. Other comedy stuff that they do, they'll try to do comedy stuff in their talk shows, and it just falls on deaf ears. And some of the stuff that's supposed to be taken seriously is laughed at. Like all the stuff that Dolph Ziggler has done lately. He's just basically being seen as a goddamn joke. And, like, how in the world are we supposed to take the guy seriously? The guy used to be in the Spirit Squad, had to fight out of that, and then was, just, I'm Dolph Ziggler, nice to meet you. And then, what did he end up doing? He ended up, transforming and becoming a whole serious guy and everything. But then they never really stuck with him. Other examples of comedy in wrestling. And this is where I'm going to get a little bit harsh, I guess. Well, Impact tried to do some comedy, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And yeah, when it was TNA, even when it was Impact, Impact unfortunately doesn't have enough buzz right now, but they have a really, really good talent roster. I do want to say that, despite the fact Michael Elgin is there and Rich Swann and Sami Callihan, and mainly I'll actually put Elgin and then Callahan and then Swann there. I'm sure there are others. They actually have a really good talent roster and a really good amount of women there. A really good amount of talented women. Sometimes comedy works. I've been to plenty of indie shows where they've done comedy. Ravenous Randy Myers can mix great wrestling and some comedy. He understands his role though, and he works well with that and can work a different style and not just his style. Juice Robinson's somebody that does some comedy. I didn't get to see Juice Robinson live, unfortunately, this past Friday because I had just gone to the Super J Cup the day before and, well, money, but also I had to work. I would have liked to have seen that match. That would have been kind of funny. But sometimes comedy can work pretty well when you get people that can do comedy wrestling, but also work, and put on a serious match. It's a hard thing to do. And now we're going to get to the one where it's a guy I've actually met a few times, Joey Ryan. I'm going to say right now, I don't care for Joey Ryan's shtick. And yes, I know that's opening up a whole bunch of comments right there, but I don't hate Joey Ryan, the person. I don't. Met the guy. Nice guy. Nice guy. Actually, slipped him instead of for a $10 autograph. I slipped him 20 because I had met him at another show and didn't have any money, but got a picture with him. So I said, hey, I don't know if you remember, because it was like a week. I think it was a week before. I said, hey, or a week or month before. I hand him 20. I said, hey, I don't know if you remember me. I took a picture with you. Didn't have any money. I said, that's my little way of making it up, and he appreciated it. I don't hate Joey Ryan as a person. I don't necessarily care for what he does in the ring. Even though he can work, he found what works for him. It's not for me. I don't like it, but I don't hate the guy for it. Do I think that it kind of shits on wrestling? I think the stuff that shits on wrestling more, if we're going to go off on just a little bit of a tangent here, is the deathmatch stuff. That's not, to me, that's not wrestling. I've talked about that in the past, but comedy wrestling, yes, I don't necessarily care for it. I think it kind of dilutes a lot of, stuff that's happening in the ring. How are we supposed to take other matches seriously if these guys are doing this in the ring? To me, the deathmatch wrestling and a whole lot of stuff with the light tubes and all that and a whole bunch of bullshit, that is more offensive to me than comedy. Though I admit that I don't care for, and it's like when people showed the Joey Ryan penis party, clips and stuff like that. I'm like, you should know what you're getting into when you go to that show. But I'm just like, no, that's not wrestling. See, that's not wrestling to me. I'm not saying the people involved aren't wrestlers. That's one thing I want to make clear here at 10 minutes into the video, of course, that just because they're comedy wrestlers, or just because I don't like their comedy, just because I think it's bullshit, does not mean I don't think they're wrestlers. But it does kind of shit a bit on wrestling. Maybe not as much deathmatch wrestling, but I already said that. So yeah, Joey Ryan stuff don't necessarily care for. Though I admit, not a bad guy. If he's at another show that I'm gonna be at, and later this year or next year, I will shake his hand, maybe even buy a shirt. Because I can appreciate the fact that the guy toiled away in wrestling for years and years and years until he found something to work for him, even if it doesn't work for me. Orange Cassidy is somebody, a name I'm going to throw out. I don't get it. I've seen a little bit of Orange Cassidy on YouTube. Okay, he can actually wrestle. Great. My problem is if he doesn't take it seriously, why should I take him seriously? I just don't care for the guy. I just fucking don't. It's not something that I necessarily like. Yeah, he can do a kip up with his hands in his pockets. That's great. That's actually impressive. Okay. Sorry, I don't care for that stuff. NXT has done some comedy stuff. You could argue the Velveteen Dream can do some comedy wrestling. Velveteen Dream's actually a legit worker and everything, but he actually can be a bit comedy, but he is really goddamn good. He can meld that, his facial expressions, the outlandish, gear that he has, everything, the outlandish entrances. It works, but when he gets in the ring, he can get down to business and do some really good shit in the ring. Joey Janela is another one. I consider him a comedy wrestler, and I saw him at Defy Northwest Wrestling Show about a month ago today. I'm sorry. I just don't get it with Joey. I just don't. I just don't. I do not get it with Joey. Never have. It's like, after seeing him live, he entered to Enter Sandman. It was cool seeing Enter Sandman live. That was about it. I didn't really give two shits once he started wrestling. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have his fans. That doesn't mean that he can't appeal to people. He just doesn't appeal to me. And then we go with somebody like Marco Stunt. Marco Stunt, it's like the James Ellsworth thing, except Marco is not a creep like, Ellsworth is and always will be, because by God, good God, that's ridiculous. But Ellsworth was a comedy wrestler. It worked for a little bit, and then WWE signed him, and they just kept it going for way too goddamn long. Marco Stunt, it's like watching a kid try to wrestle and he's going to get hurt. Sometimes comedy works. The Best Friends, Chuck Taylor and, Trent Beretta. Or Beretta. I'm just still going to call him Trent Beretta because that's what I called him for years. He can do some comedy stuff. Some of the women can do comedy stuff. There was an example of like a comedy spot in a Nia Jax Alexa Bliss match where I think Alexa slapped Nia and Nia just screamed at her, and then Alexa's like, she just screams. It was just a funny spot. It was a funny spot. But that was just a comedy spot where it wasn't really, like them doing a move and making a joke out of it. And that's where I have a problem with it. If you're going to make jokes out of the moves, okay, don't necessarily care for that. Have fun in wrestling. Hey, people got to find a way to be different. That's okay. But I've never been the biggest fan of doing so much comedy in wrestling and not taking it seriously. But you got to have fun with what you're doing. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Priscilla Kelly tampon spot. Once again, I have met Priscilla Kelly at multiple shows. Very, very nice, very talented, yes, and very beautiful woman. She is. Her and Darby Allin are perfect for each other. Got to meet both of them at, I believe, Darby's last Without a Cause show. Darby Allin is one of the nicest guys that you will ever meet. Priscilla Kelly, one of the nicest women you will ever meet. Two of the nicest people, period, you will ever meet. Now, do I care for the tampon spot stuff? No, I don't. I don't care for the dick spot stuff either. So I'm even on that stuff. But that doesn't mean I can't appreciate the performer. I may not appreciate certain aspects of stuff they do in the ring, but that's just really what it comes down to. Do I want anything bad to happen to any of these comedy wrestlers or anything? No. I get angry, I get fired up about it, and I always will, but that doesn't mean that I hate any of them to the point that I want anything bad to happen to them. But just the bottom line is, in closing, comedy in wrestling is tough to do. Yes, you get stuff back in the 80s and the 90s, and yes, the Attitude Era had a whole bunch of bullshit and everything, and boy, by God, did it ever. WCW had a lot of stuff that was attempted to be comedy, but it was mainly Russo booking. It was not very good at all. The whole point is, comedy in wrestling, it's all subjective. What I don't find entertaining and what I present to you guys may find entertaining. And that's fine. Do I think it shits on wrestling? To an extent. I think deathmatch wrestling shits on, at least, a lot of deathmatch wrestling shits on wrestling more. Now, I'm not talking stuff like Terry Funk and Cactus Jack and other people did. And I'm not talking hardcore wrestling to an extent I think works, kind of, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. And I have my reasons for it. But comedy and wrestling, all subjective, and that's all I really have to say. So I'd love to hear, what you guys have to say in the comments. So let me know. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.